find the secret to unlimited energy? And is there a plot to hide his findings?
Imagine a world before power plants, before coal-fed dynamos and humming electric grids, yet lights still flickered on in towers, factories, and observatories. It sounds impossible, but in the late 1800s, engineers quietly did something we've been taught could never happen. They pulled energy straight from the air, not myth, not rumor. Real technology, patented, documented, and physically built into churches, lighthouses, and rooftop structures that still stand today. This is the story of how the Victorians captured atmospheric power and why the world chose to forget they ever did. When towers did more than ring bells. Before the world was wired, before cities hummed with power stations and glowing networks of electric cables, there existed a different era. It was a time when the sky itself was seen not simply as weather or atmosphere, but as a vast sea of electrical energy waiting to be tapped. If you look at any major European or American city built before 1900 and simply raise your eyes upward, you will notice a pattern most people ignore. Church towers, government buildings, observatories, and factories often feature long metal rods projecting into the air. Today's visitors assume they are nothing more than lightning protection. The legacy of Benjamin Franklin's famous experiment in 1752. Tour guides repeat this confidently, and crowds accept it without question. But that explanation, while partially true, is incomplete. Hidden in archives, buried in patent offices, and preserved in journals written by the greatest engineers of their age, is a forgotten truth. These rods and structures did more than protect buildings. They were part of systems designed to draw power from the sky itself. Atmospheric electricity was once a respected field of engineering. It was documented, funded, installed, operated, and then, just as quietly, erased from memory when new technologies rose to power. This story is not a conspiracy, nor is it the claim of miraculous free energy. It is instead a window into a chapter of real scientific history, lost over time as the world industrialized and redefined what electricity was allowed to mean. To understand how startling and extraordinary this forgotten technology once was, we must return to the period between 1840 and 1920, a time when the future of electricity was still unknown and still being fought over. What if the spires of old cities weren't just reaching for the heavens? What if they were pulling power from them? In every corner of Europe and America, hidden in plain sight, lie clues to a forgotten electrical age buried in the architecture above us. The Forgotten Electrical Revolution, 1840 to 1920. Modern people assume that electricity began with Edison's bulbs, steam generators, and coal-fired dynamos. That is only one path, the path that ultimately won. But in the late 19th century, the world stood at a crossroads. Engineers were not yet sure whether mankind would create its own electricity artificially, or whether humanity would harness the natural electricity that already existed between Earth and the sky. Atmospheric electricity, also called ground electricity, was not a fringe curiosity. It was a subject of mainstream scientific attention. Measurements taken both then and now show that the Earth constantly generates an electrical field. Between the surface of the Earth and the upper atmosphere exists a measurable voltage difference. Even under clear skies today, this field averages between 100 and 150 volts per meter. Raise a metal conductor 10 meters into the air, and the potential difference surpasses 1,000 volts. Raise it higher, and the voltage increases further. The more surface area the conductor has, the more electricity it can attract. Connect that elevated conductor to a grounded system below, and electricity begins to move. Victorian engineers were not merely aware of this phenomenon. They aggressively attempted to harness it through antennas, conductive building materials, buried ground plates, elevated rods, rooftop collection grids, capacitor banks, switching mechanisms, and early transformers. Their work was not theoretical. It was not speculative. It was real. It appeared in patents filed with governments. It was described in journals written by distinguished engineers. It was recorded in city archives. And most astonishingly, Remnants of this technology physically still exist, built into towers that millions of people pass every day without recognizing what they once were. Yet, despite its existence, its documentation, and its real-world operation, this technology quietly faded out of the world. It was not erased violently. It was not hidden because it threatened powerful interests. It simply lost a technological battle. Steam generators, water turbines, and later fossil fuel power stations became cheaper, more predictable, and more scalable. Atmospheric electricity was useful, but unreliable, weather-dependent, and ultimately inadequate for a world that demanded power on a scale it could not provide. And so, the sky ceased to be a power source. Towers that once drew energy from the air were stripped of their wiring, their capacitors removed, their purpose forgotten. Today, they remain as silent architectural ghosts, structures that reveal their secret only if the observer knows what to look for. The first evidence, architecture, that still whispers its secrets. If you explore the old cities of Europe with a curious eye, Leipzig, Vienna, Paris, Boston, Cincinnati, you will see architectural clues hidden in plain sight. Church towers rising like metal fingers into the sky, municipal buildings crowned with copper networks, observatories surrounded by aerial wires that seemingly served no religious or decorative purpose. The standard explanation, delivered confidently by tourist guides who never questioned the history they memorized, is that these structures were lightning protection, nothing more. A single pointed rod, thick copper wiring descending to Earth, a basic formula discovered by Franklin. But many of these structures betray a far more complex intention. Some church towers do not merely feature a rod, they boast elaborate clusters of them, arranged horizontally, radiating outward like antennae. Why would a lightning rod need horizontal collectors? Why would a building require copper grids running the length of roofs, descending not simply into the soil, but into sealed basements where, as forgotten documents reveal, capacitor banks were once housed? The answer lies not in speculation, but in archived construction records, academic reports, preserved blueprints, and surviving photographs. St. Nicholas Church in Leipzig, built between 1844 and 1847, was one of the earliest public structures known to contain such a system. The copper rods mounted on its tower were recorded not merely as lightning protection, but as part of an installation for electrical experimentation, partially funded by a scientific society fascinated with atmospheric current. The system remained intact until the tower suffered damage in 1943 during the war, but photographs taken earlier still preserve its strange configuration. Vienna City Hall, whose grand towers define the skyline, was constructed between 1872 and 1883. Original architectural plans, preserved and yellowed with time, include a section labeled Atmospheric Capture Network for emergency lighting, describing metal domes and rooftop grids connected deliberately to capacitors installed in the building's sublevel. Maintenance logs from the 1890s mention inspections of collector grounding and replacement of storage elements, language that makes no logical sense for lightning safety, but perfectly aligns with the blueprint of a system intended to harvest electricity. Across the ocean in Cincinnati, an observatory built in 1873 did not merely point its instruments toward stars. It connected itself to the living electric breath of the sky. Surrounding poles and overhead wires once captured current that researchers recorded in scientific journals of the time, noting fluctuations in atmospheric charge and the surprising ability of the system to power small instruments. Photographs reveal a web of collectors far too intricate for lightning alone. Even the factories of the industrial age, often thought to be powered exclusively by steam, reveal in their records an alternate story. In Manchester, at a textile complex built in 1881, engineers installed a metal roof shaped in a curious pattern of ribs and domes. Technical drawings show these metal forms connected directly into grounding systems and capacitor banks in the basement. The installation reduced the factory's reliance on steam-powered generators, providing enough harvested atmospheric energy to support night lighting for years. Today, these rooftops and towers stand weathered but unchanged. The metal rods still protrude into the air. The copper, where it remains, is green with age. Their original purpose is unknown to the people who walk beneath them every day. Yet, if you understand their history, you can visit these sites yourself, touch the iron and copper, and feel the ghosts of a forgotten electrical age beneath your fingertips. Look up next time you walk beneath a church steeple or municipal roof, because what you're seeing may be the remnants of a 19th century electrical system designed not for lightning protection, but to siphon power from the sky itself. The second evidence, patents that prove it was real. Beyond structures and towers, the strongest written evidence lies in the language of patents. Filed officially in the United States, Britain, France, and Germany between 1860 and 1920, these documents describe atmospheric electric systems with unflinching precision. They do not indulge fantasy, nor do they speak in speculative ideas. They specify metal thickness, exact lengths of conductors, grounding depths, coil turns, capacitor capacities, and installation heights. They are legal blueprints for real machines built by real engineers. In 1871, American inventor Nathan Stubblefield was granted a patent for an apparatus designed to utilize electricity naturally existing between earth and air. His drawings show metal plates raised above ground, connected by circuits containing coils and capacitors, engineered to extract a low but usable current. British engineer Charles Varley, known for his pioneering work in submarine telegraph systems, patented a method of suspending wires via tethered balloons to capture charge from high altitudes, effectively turning the sky into a silent generator. French engineer Villon, granted a patent in 1868, described rooftop conductor networks connected into basement capacitor jars to provide lighting during clear nights. German inventors Moser and Strecker patented a hollow metal tower design whose inner structure alternated capacitor charging cycles, a system remarkably similar to modern-day pulse harvesting technologies. These documents, stored in dusty vaults and digital databases alike, give testimony to a forgotten chapter in human engineering. Their language is cautious, scientific, modest. None of them promise miracles. They describe supplemental power of small wattage, useful during clear, dry weather, suitable for telegraph instruments, emergency lamps, and batteries. They acknowledge weakness and intermittency. They present nothing beyond physics and nothing below it either. They confirm atmospheric electricity was taken seriously by the scientific minds of the 19th century, and that real systems were proposed, patented, and in some cases, constructed. The third evidence, scientists who measured the sky. In the 19th century, scientific journals recorded their experiments with methodical precision. Lord Kelvin, one of the greatest physicists in history, published measurements of atmospheric electricity in 1860. Augustus Waller, writing in 1882, recorded current flowing through permanent rooftop collectors. Other journals analyzed the electrical ions of the atmosphere and demonstrated beyond doubt that the air itself is not empty, but a conductor filled with charges shaped by weather, sunlight, and solar activity. Their pages now lie faded in university archives, but their data remains undeniable. The sky is electric. History becomes undeniable not when ideas are imagined, but when they are built. Across the late 19th century, atmospheric electricity did not remain confined to journals, sketches, or laboratory notes. It entered the real world. It powered lamps. It charged batteries. It illuminated hotels and observatories during stormless nights when no other source of power existed. One of the clearest examples comes from the Brevoort Hotel in New York, where in March of 1895, a technical review described a 60-foot metal tower positioned on the rooftop, connected by heavy copper conductors to a battery bank hidden below street level. During favorable weather, the system collected enough current to power small lamps and maintain electrical charge overnight. The article even included diagrams, measurements, and a testimonial that the system operated until renovations removed it years later. It was never designed to run the hotel, but it supplemented it, easing the load of fuel-powered generators and providing an emergency reserve long before municipal grids existed. Similarly, the Blue Hill Observatory near Boston installed its own atmospheric collector in 1885. Its founder, Abbot Lawrence Roch, kept meticulous diaries. Inside brittle pages now encased in archival plastic, His handwriting records the numbers, currents rising on clear days, dropping beneath thick fog, and occasionally delivering enough power to maintain the charge of scientific instruments that required only a whisper of energy to survive the night. For 2 decades, the observatory survived on a married system: battery power when the sky was generous, and dynamos when the weather forced surrender. In France, the textile factory at Lyon tells a quieter but equally compelling story. In 1888, its owners installed a metal roof designed with ribs and rounded domes, connected downward into a storage system that saved the company 40 francs a year in fuel by providing supplementary lighting. That was not a revolution, but for a business owner balancing the ledgers in a century where every franc mattered, it was enough to justify keeping the system in operation for years. Far from the bustle of cities, a lonely lighthouse on the wind-torn Cornish coast depended on the sky itself for survival. Trinity House records from the late 1800s mention an overhead collector used to maintain emergency batteries when storms battered vessels and darkness threatened navigation. Long before solar panels became a modern emblem of renewable power, a lighthouse stood like a metallic prayer tower, gathering charge from the clouds to keep ships alive. Evidence does not whisper here. It speaks with names, dates, and written records. These installations existed. They worked. They powered real systems. And like many early technologies, they were eventually left behind, eclipsed by engines that promised more control, more power, and more certainty. Why the sky was abandoned. To understand the death of atmospheric electricity, we must understand the world it was born into. In the 1880s, electrification was fragile. Most buildings were dark. A generator required steam and coal, or a water wheel grinding beneath constant force. To install one was expensive, loud, and vulnerable. In that landscape, atmospheric harvesting made sense. It required only metal, wire, and patience. It produced no soot. It required no fuel. It was silent. Its greatest flaw, however, was written into the air itself. The sky is moody. Its electric field rises with clear, dry weather, collapses when rain heavy with ions falls, and weakens when humidity thickens the air. It strengthens near mountains, weakens near oceans, bends beneath clouds, and shifts with the sun. For a scientist, this variability is a miracle. For a power company, it is a nightmare. The world chose predictability. Coal-powered dynamos offered steady current. Steam engines did not wait for weather. Water turbines pulsed day and night. And then, when Edison, Tesla, and Westinghouse ignited the race of alternating current versus direct current, the electric world changed forever. Electricity ceased to be a quiet, marginal tool. It became civilization itself. Atmospheric electricity could no longer compete. Its power output was tiny, enough for small lamps, telegraphs, and laboratory instruments, but never large enough to turn factories, heat homes, or light entire cities. When municipal grids arrived in the early 20th century, they offered a simple solution: plug in. As wires marched down streets like veins bringing power to the body of society, the old rooftop collectors were abandoned. Their copper was stripped for war metal. Their towers stood, mute and purposeless. Their very memory faded. The death of atmospheric electricity was not a conspiracy. It was evolution. Technology, like species, survives only if it can adapt or dominate. Atmospheric harvesting did neither. It remained a narrow technology in a small window of history, and then time stepped past it. The physics that explain why it could never rule the modern world. To understand why atmospheric electricity never scaled, we must accept what 19th century scientists knew but the public rarely learned. Voltage is not power. The Earth ionosphere system forms a natural capacitor. Earth carries a negative charge. The ionosphere, 50 kilometers above, carries a positive charge. Between them, the sky acts as an insulator. The result is a potential difference, a voltage gradient of roughly 100 volts per meter in good weather. But power requires not only voltage, it requires current. And in the atmosphere, current density is so low that it borders on a whisper. A 1-meter collector surface under 1,000 volts yields only a few picoamperes, too small to do anything. Only by raising collectors high, widening their area, sharpening rods to ionize air, grounding deeply into wet soil, and storing charge over hours in capacitors could 19th century engineers gather enough to be useful. This is why every real installation included batteries. It was not flowing power, it was harvested power, slowly collected and quietly saved. Against today's demands, air conditioners, data centers, electric grids, the sky is too small. It could never compete. Yet, the century that birthed this technology did not have such needs. A telegraph line needed only milliwatts. A lamp needed only a handful of watts. Science does not ask for megawatts. It asks only for proof. And the proof existed. Whenever forgotten technology resurfaces, two forces awaken alongside it. One claims that the past was worthless and crude. The other insists the past contained miracles that were stolen. Reality lives in neither extreme. Atmospheric electricity was not infinite energy. It was never suppressed by shadowy powers. But neither was it myth. It was real engineering. Modest, documented, functional, and it served a world whose needs were small. How an entire technology disappeared. As the 20th century rose like a mechanical dawn, the world became louder. Cities filled with coal furnaces, steel railways, internal combustion engines, and electric stations that roared like caged beasts. Electricity was no longer a delicate force teased from the sky. It was a power that men manufactured, burned fuel to obtain, and controlled with switches, gears, and rotating dynamos. In that changing world, atmospheric electricity seemed almost quaint, an echo of an age where engineers believed that nature itself might be willing to share its energy freely. The transformation was not sudden. Atmospheric collectors continued to exist in quiet corners long after the world forgot how to read them. Church towers kept their rods for decades, but their capacitors were removed, their basements emptied, their diagrams misplaced. New architects inherited these buildings and assumed the rods were merely lightning protection. No teacher corrected them. No books mentioned otherwise. Knowledge dies most efficiently when no one remembers it was ever alive. The most powerful mechanism of disappearance was not technology, but storytelling. When electricity became a symbol of modern power, of smokestacks, turbines, and incandescent bulbs glowing in Times Square, no one wanted to remember that there was once a gentler rival. Atmospheric electricity did not fit the narrative of progress. It did not belong to Edison or Tesla or Westinghouse. It was not a battle won. It simply never entered the arena. And so, it became invisible. University lectures stopped mentioning it. Museums never built exhibits for it. Children grew up believing electricity had only a single origin story, the men with wires and dynamos. And yet, tucked away in archives, atmospheric electricity continued to whisper through patents, journals, building plans, capacitors forgotten in dusty storerooms. Even now, if one searches the basement of certain European municipal buildings, one might find strange copper bus bars emerging from walls with no apparent purpose, remnants of a system whose language modern engineers no longer speak. The world beyond the blueprint. To understand why atmospheric harvesting died, you must imagine the world of the 1880s, not through textbooks, but through lived reality. A single light bulb was a luxury. A telegraph station powered by a battery meant communication across continents. A hotel offering even occasional electric lamps was a marvel tourists would write about in letters. Electricity did not need to be large to matter. A few watts could transform a night. But by the 1920s, electricity had become expectation, not wonder. Cities now demanded thousands of homes lit at once. Factories needed motors. Theaters needed spotlights. Hospitals needed operating rooms that never darkened. The standard of living increased faster than atmospheric harvesting ever could. A technology born in an era of lanterns could not survive in an era of skyscrapers. Atmospheric electricity was a bridge that led humanity across a river of uncertainty. Once on the other side, the bridge no longer mattered. The world no longer needed it, and humanity seldom honors the tools that helped it survive only briefly. What remains today is not myth, but metal. Walk through Leipzig and look up at St. Nicholas Church. In preserved photographs, the rods are there, too many for lightning, arranged like a crown meant to drink from the sky. Visit Vienna City Hall, and an observant eye will notice the strange, interconnected domes still laced with ironwork, though the cables that once led below have long been cut. Stand before the Cincinnati Observatory on a quiet afternoon and imagine the aerial lines that once connected its roof to the open air, a scientific lung-breathing electricity into its instruments. Go to Manchester and trace your fingers across the metal ribs of factory roofs that once fed modest wattage into storage batteries. Go to Cornwall and hear the sea crash against rock, while remembering that a lighthouse once pulled charge from the atmosphere simply to keep a lamp alive when nothing else could. What remains is not just architecture, it is evidence. Evidence that history is less linear than we believe. Evidence that technology does not always progress cleanly from past to present. Evidence that innovation is often forgotten, not because it failed, but because it did not win loudly enough. Perhaps the most unsettling truth is this: history is curated. We remember only what fits the story we want to believe. We celebrate the inventions that led to empires and industries, not the ones that were bypassed. Atmospheric electricity was neither fraudulent nor miraculous. It simply failed to scale. And because of that, it was denied a place in the pantheon of triumph. Yet, hidden technologies still shape how we think today. Modern research on climate science, weather modeling, wireless communication, and electrical storms all trace conceptual roots back to the same atmospheric studies that once powered lamps and telegraphs. The forgotten systems did not produce megawatts, but they produced insight. They taught engineers how charge behaves in the air. They taught meteorologists how storms form. They taught scientists how to measure the invisible. And then, quietly, they were allowed to die. The paper trail that would not burn. Even as the physical hardware of atmospheric electricity faded from rooftops and bell towers, something survived that no demolition crew could erase. Paper, ink, diagrams, records. In quiet stacks of libraries that smell of dust and time, in folders tucked deep within national patent registries and in university archives digitized only in recent years, the history of this forgotten electrical era still breathes. Open a patent book from 1871, and you will find Stubblefield's sketched device. Metal plates raised above the ground, capacitors below, annotations noting the exact thickness of copper and the minimum height required for collection. Browse British filings from the 1860s, and Varley's balloon-hung conductors float across the page, his elegant handwriting explaining how air itself can be persuaded to reveal its stored charge. Read the French documents of 1868, and Villon describes an installation designed so clearly that any modern engineer could rebuild it. German records from 1881 show hollow metal towers built like organs of the atmosphere, switching charge flows between capacitor banks with mechanical precision. The world forgot the story, but the evidence never left. It simply waited for someone to care. Today, the past is not truly gone. It only hides. Walk through the old quarter of Leipzig with a photograph from 1900 in your hand. Line the spires up with the skyline. Trace the rods that disappeared between photographs. Stand beneath Vienna City Hall and ask why a lightning rod looks more like a conductor array. Wander an old factory district and look not at brick or window, but at the strange seams where metal meets masonry in ways that no decorative architect would ever have chosen. The leftovers of atmospheric electricity are not relics behind glass. They are still welded into the bones of cities. If you know the language of the past, if you recognize how capacitance was once built into towers, how grounding rods once hid beneath stone steps, how copper wiring once snaked into basements, you can read these structures like a story carved into sky and stone. And if you cannot travel, then the archives will come to you. Google patents, university libraries, digitized journals. Search for atmospheric electricity from 1860 to 1920. Read the papers of Lord Kelvin. Study the diagrams in Annalen der Physik. Follow the careful measurements written in the Journal of the Franklin Institute. Anyone, anywhere can resurrect this knowledge simply by opening the pages that the world ignored. It is easy to imagine that technologies die because they were failures. But the truth is more complicated, more human. Technologies die because the world changes around them. Atmospheric electricity was functional. It harvested real power. It lit lamps, charged batteries, allowed isolated buildings to breathe light out of darkness. But it could not grow fast enough to light cities, could not power factories, could not fuel the ambitions of an industrializing world hungry for more. The death of atmospheric electricity was not tragic. It was natural. A seed that sprouts, survives one season, then withers because a forest of taller trees grew around it. Yet, its story still matters. Not because it could have powered the world, but because it shows us how quickly humanity forgets. It reminds us that even real achievements can vanish when they are not celebrated. It teaches that innovation is never a straight line, but a landscape filled with dead ends that still taught us how to walk. The greatest irony is that atmospheric electricity did not truly disappear. It only transformed. The same science once used to light a hotel now helps meteorologists track storms. The same measurements once taken on church towers now underpin climate models. The same idea, that air itself can hold energy, now fuels research into wireless energy transfer, drone-borne power capture, high-altitude solar platforms, and even space-based electricity systems. What was once a forgotten curiosity has become the ancestor of a future technology yet to be born. Your curiosity keeps history alive. If you enjoyed this dive into forgotten technology, please like the video and subscribe so more investigations like this can reach the world. Click the video on your screen to continue the story. Until then, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.